Good afternoon. My name is Doug Moore. I have been in technology for almost 4 decades. And that means, you know what that means?
A long time.
It means I'm older than probably everybody in this room. But don't fear that, just fear old age and treachery. I consider myself an activist for change. I'm a rancher. I'm a lover of music and anything outdoors. And I'm going to share just a few thoughts from my journey today. I can summarize why you should change very simply as the world is constantly changing around us. We must continuously adapt and improve if we're to remain relevant. And I think you're going to see a lot of overlap and parallel with the talks you heard earlier from Katie Mayers and Corey. What I'm going to talk about is from a business perspective, ways to build resilience into your business, and also the conscious choice to make change. So with that, what are the ABCs of change? That's my call of action to you today. ABC means always be changing. Yes, I know it's corny. I thought that up all by myself. I'll spend a little bit of time talking about the 2 types of change you will likely see in your business, but also within your life. And I think everything that we discuss from a business perspective here has a personal overlap. So the first is change that you're forced to make. That's typically change that comes with crisis. You don't see it coming, and we'll talk about what do you do. The second is change that you choose to make. That's purposeful or intentional change. And that kind of change can truly become your superpower. My little superhero there, thank you, Dolly 3. We didn't use any trademark infractions making these slides. So I'd like to start with just a little bit of my journey. I want to reflect back to the time that I moved to Texas, and more specifically, the North Dallas area, the Richardson Telecom corridor in 1999. And that's what I affectionately call the good old days. It was an era flush in internet and communications money. In fact, it's been estimated that the 5 years following the 1996 Telecoms Act, there was $500 billion invested in new network infrastructure. And I was a young sales executive. It was a great time to be in technology. It was a great time to be selling. In fact, one of my favorite things, I had a competitor down the road, won't say the name of the company, but it begins with a C and rhymes with ISCO. They used to fly a plane over our campus routinely with a banner advertising jobs and signing bonuses. It was just a great time. So we had to deal with attrition. We had perpetually competitors, venture capitalists, and our clients stealing our key talent. That was just the norm of the day, and it was, salary increases and stock options and signing bonuses. And that really my primary role then as a young sales executive was just hiring people. The technology almost sold itself. And I still think back in early 2000 to like one of the singularly dumbest moments of my career. And I called my dad up one Sunday evening and I said, I'm going to retire in 3 years. I was like 36 years old. And he said, how are you going to do that? I said, I'm going to have these stock options. We're going to do a carve out and, everything is loaded. And I had friends in many tech companies, both VC and large companies. They were banking on their RSUs or their options to carry them forward. It was a utopian view, but the reality was that $500 billion and all that venture capital money was building a lot more capacity in the market than we needed. and the internet bubble was destined to collapse. And I felt that very acutely between 2000 and 2001. First, the internet bubble collapsed, and then the telecommunications bubble. And I went from hiring constantly to an almost endless circle of force reductions. And our company and a number of others in the area, we ended up removing over 75% of our headcount in about a 2-year span of time. I mean, it's really, really painful. So I learned the hard way, companies have to make these adjustments in a time like that. There's no other option. Our revenues went from billions to hundreds of millions. The spending in our industry was reduced by close to 80%. So I learned the hard way the trials and tribulations of the downside of that. And just as I thought things couldn't get much harder, 9/11 occurred. I had just started a new job. I flew Monday evening, September 10th, to Dulles, and I was in our office in Fairfax, Virginia, when in the next morning, and I'll still never forget, the administrative assistant in the office caught me at the door. She's screaming, "The World Trade Center's on fire." We went in a conference room, and I watched on TV as the plane hit the second tower. And I knew things were bad, but then over the ensuing next couple hours, I realized just the depth of that problem. As those buildings collapsed, more people came into the office, and then I very quickly learned I had a team of people in Lower Manhattan in one of the buildings directly adjacent to the trade centers. And that building was owned by one of our biggest customers. That customer provided critical services to Lower Manhattan, the boroughs, and most especially to Wall Street. So immediately we went into disaster mode. The first thing I did was solidify the safety of our employees, and we had to track them all down. It was really difficult. I don't know how many of you remember that day, but if you tried to make a phone call, the circuits were busy. It didn't matter where you're at, everybody immediately went to their phones. But we finally found everybody. Many of them had walked out through Midtown. Some walked out across the Brooklyn Bridge. We just all reached out immediately to our client to start to understand their needs. And I set up a communication channel with my senior management back in Texas. So the next day I drove to Lower Manhattan. I'll never forget going up the turnpike in New Jersey and seeing the smoke and the glow from the buildings there. It was really, truly surreal. Anyway, we met with our client. We set up a war room in Midtown. I had every technician in our company within 150 miles drive to Manhattan. We determined what infrastructure, and my company provided electronic equipment, multiplexing equipment that's used in broadband communications. We determined what they needed, and we mustered our factory here in Texas to begin building round the clock. We chartered buses, and we shipped the equipment up in those buses and moving vans because you couldn't fly anything at that time. And then we joined our client and all of our industry partners working around the clock to be able to get Wall Street lit up by the following Monday. And I'm so pleased when that occurred. That Monday, that was what started to bring stability back to our economy. And again, those of you that remember that time, the collapse of the buildings and then subsequently the closure of Wall Street, our markets took tremendous drops, along with obviously the horrific loss of people. So as I think back to that time, a few things stand out to me. The first is, we had to act really quickly. We had to break down all bureaucracy. We did not have any business process. We didn't have purchase orders. It was just do it and don't second guess it, right? And we did that and we got it done. And as I think about that, that's one of the most energizing and exciting times of my career. I was so proud of how my company reacted. And I also think back to the haunting time that we were in, and it was scary, right? Because these things happen with no expectation. So that really got me thinking about change and how change can happen faster than you realize. So as you think about what we experienced in 9/11 and the dot-com bust, again, they were crisis-driven. And almost everybody in that time had to implement force reductions and austerity programs. But the thing you realize is in crisis, what matters is acting quickly and acting decisively. That has to stem the problem at that time. The good news is the answers are usually obvious. You know, listening to one of the earlier speakers talk about dragging, Dr. Kamala, where she's somewhere in here, dragging the person out of the room to safety, that's instinct. That's just doing what's right, but doing it quickly, and that's what matters. So usually those actions are obvious, but they're frequently painful, like for us, reducing people. In COVID-19, I don't know about the rest of you, I had just come back from Thailand, Korea, and Japan, on a business trip at the beginning of March. When this hit, we immediately went into preparation mode. What are we going to do? I told my staff, let's stagger 2 and 3. We'll have 3 days in, 2 days out, 2 days in, 3 days out. That lasted exactly 1 week. I remember coming in the office one day, and there was an engineer in our software development group. The guy was wearing a gas mask. He may as well have wrapped his entire body in cellophane. I mean, the message was loud and clear to me. We had to basically go to remote work for everybody we possibly could. So that also enforced to me one of my favorite sayings that people say that I abuse, but things are usually not as good as they seem or as bad as they seem at any given time. I didn't invent that, obviously, but it's true, right? During the heyday of the internet bubble, I was delusional about my situation. It was not as strong as I thought it was. In the depths of the burst, I never envisioned the fact that we would grow from 2003 to 2010 from the number 4 position in our market to the number 1. And part of that was due to the way we reacted and worked with our clients during this crisis. So that really began to get me to think about and reckon with how do you manage change more purposefully, more intentionally? And if you look at businesses that don't have a clear strategy and vision of where they're going, inevitably you see challenge. But you also see challenge where businesses have a strategy and a vision, but it's inflexible, it hasn't moved in years. And that begins what I call the slow rot of a business. And just think about this for a minute, because the big trends are typically obvious. So I went from the internet bubble to the digital era, in the early 2000s to 2010. In 2004, Domino's Pizza reinvented themselves. They went through one of the greatest business transformations of all time. They changed their business model from being a brick and mortar pizza shop with some delivery to being a supply chain business, purely a delivery business. And they digitally enabled their back office, their whole company. They became one of the strongest digital marketing companies in the world, and they dominate their industry today. If you had bought, or if I had bought, and I didn't, Domino's stock in 2004, today it'd be roughly 50 times the value. There are not many examples of that, and certainly not in the restaurant business. On the other hand, look at Kodak or Blockbuster. We all know the stories there, right? Again, they were impacted by these digital trends. Kodak in the case of cameras, and Blockbuster was streaming video. I think we're going to see a similar kind of opportunity today in automotive. You have the traditional ice makers and the EVs. I'm not sure who's going to win and lose. So what that did do for me is build the notion that purposeful change is fundamental to the creation of sustainable outcomes. So I'm going to throw a few ideas at you. There are many ways that this can be accomplished, and again, this is more of a business approach. But the first important thing to understand if you're going to change is to understand what you want to be. Where do you want to be? What is your vision for the future? If you're an individual, do you want to improve your career? Do you want to get promoted? Do you want to be a subject matter expert? Do you want to change direction? If you're a business, maybe you want to improve profitability, or you want to grow your market share. So defining your vision and then defining how you'll do that. That's your strategy. And then finally, the plan of execution. Those are the actions and the milestones by which time you will achieve that. I love a SOAP. It's a strategy on a page. We use that within my company, and we actually cascade it down within organizations. And it's a great way to do it because you can start at the top with a high level, and each organization right down to every individual contributor can create their own. I'll highlight a couple other things that I think are really important. The organization and the culture will impact your ability to implement your strategy. And if you don't pay attention to those things, there's a high likelihood you'll fail. So you have to ask yourself, as you're defining your plan of execution, your change plan, right? Does my organization have the skills to do this? Do I need to provide training? Do people have the right authority? Maybe we need to juggle things around a little bit. Maybe we need to hire people or maybe remove people. In either case, whichever way you go, you have to understand those challenges. If it's not possible to change the organization, then you got to modify your strategy. The other thing is culture. Now, everybody says, and it's been said a million times, culture eats strategy. But I'm here to tell you it doesn't have to. You can deliberately impact your culture. And I actually believe the hardest change to make, but the most beneficial for most companies, is implementing a change plan and culture. And one thing we had good luck with as we looked at our strategy and our organization was defining the behaviors that we liked about ourselves and also defining what we didn't like about ourselves and building a model to move from where we were to where we wanted to be. And we took that, we actually codified it into our human resource process. We built it into our performance management, and we messaged it loud and clear. And speaking of messaging, no plan is effective, no strategy or vision, if people don't understand it. So you have to communicate over and over and over again. And as you communicate, you have to be welcoming to take input, because it's very likely that your plan is not perfect. It's very likely there are flaws, and people collectively can do better things than people individually. And then finally, I'll just say, I like to follow a PDCA process, but whatever you do, if you're making an individual and organizational plan, follow a process. It could be Kaizen, it could be Lean Six Sigma. These are all improvement processes. They all will help you, but you have to be willing in this type of scenario to adjust along the fly. I'm also a big fan of setting finite time frames. I set myself goals in 90-day increments. So you have the opportunity to observe and hypothesize, make some actions, adjust, and continue within that time frame. So I told you a little bit about my journey, and in the year 2000, 2001, it was scary. It was a scary time for people and for businesses. I think we're in a similar time frame right now. And if you look at the big issues, again, we've evolved from the digital economy, the internet era, to now the automation economy. So I see three big issues that I think everyone in this room has some impact with: AI, the new Cold War, and climate change. So if you're a writer or a coder and AI hasn't affected you yet, get ready, because it's going to. I mean, the new generative tools are simple. Like these graphics, those are straight out of, again, DALL-E 3. If you're a farmer, a rancher like me, and you're buying diesel fuel, it's really expensive right now. Oil's been hovering up close to $100. That's all driven by our conflict and this new Cold War brewing between really, North Korea, China, Iran, and of course in the center of it, Russia versus Western nations. And then finally, climate change. Anybody here have a beach home or a house out in the country? You're going to feel the pain of climate change in homeowners' insurance premiums. In many cases, the insurers are just walking away altogether. So all of these things are risks, but they're risks that you can manage. If you are intentional, if you are purposeful, if you drive proactive change plans, you can manage these things so that you're not caught off guard reacting in crisis. So I want to thank you for your time and attention today. I want to again ask you to a call of action. Always be changing. I think, again, there's a big parallel from what we've heard before. Thank you.